morning, or is it afternoon already? We're almost there. Yes. It's just great to see you all. A packed room is the sign of interest in the subject matter, and it looks like there's just a lot of interest in what we're doing in the Arctic. So this is very welcome indeed. And I'm very glad, I feel privileged to be here and to communicate some of what the NSF is doing in the Arctic. So in a few months, we're going to be celebrating the 70th anniversary of Vannevar Bush's report to President Franklin Roosevelt, one that the president solicited. And you all know that report with its famous title now, Science, the Endless Frontier. As it envisioned how government could promote science and engineering research and education for the greater social good, the report, of course, became the base for the National Science Foundation. This anniversary is a good reminder for us to get back to the basics, namely the value of basic research. It's become increasingly clear that although conducted in places and on subjects seemingly remote, polar science matters to people everywhere on our planet. And for this reason, the National Science Foundation has been committed to supporting basic research in and about the Arctic for more than 40 years. In my brief time with you today, I'll highlight some of the major activities being conducted through NSF's polar programs. Several NSF leaders will be here throughout the forum to interact with you and answer your questions. If they could please stand to identify themselves, I'd like to introduce you. I believe we have Eric Salzman, Arctic Section Head. Richard Murray, Director of the Ocean Sciences Division. Richard, are you here yet? All right. And Kelly Faulkner, Division Director for Polar Programs. And Kelly's been doing an outstanding job managing both poles. We live on a planet dominated by our oceans, so I've made it a priority since coming in as NSF Director to gain firsthand knowledge of NSF's investments in marine research. Facilities for marine observations are a vital part of our commitments. As you see in the photo on the left, the National Science Board held its 2013 fall meeting above the ONR-owned University of Washington-operated research vessel, Thomas G. Thompson. Last summer, I traveled to Woods Hole to view the components of the Ocean Observing Initiative, the newly refurbished deep-sea submersible Alvin, and the under-ice vehicle that's seen in the photo on the right. And of course, I appreciate the vital importance of the marine environment to the Arctic region. Pictured in this slide is our latest addition to the University National Laboratory System fleet, the light-duty icebreaker Sikuliak during ice trials. And that does indeed look like an ice trial to me. NSF supported construction of the highly research-capable vessel uses Recovery Act funds, so that was a blessing to have that. Just last month, Sikuliak arrived at her home port of Seward, Alaska, where she'll be operated by the University of Alaska, and is expected to serve the nation's marine science community in the Gulf of Alaska, Bering Sea, and seasonally in the Arctic Ocean for the next several decades. I look forward to traveling to Alaska in June to meet with state and university officials and tour Arctic research vessels throughout the state, including the Sikuliak. Of course, this vessel doesn't fulfill all Arctic marine research needs. NSF will continue to work with the U.S. Coast Guard and other agencies and nations to ensure the science community has cost-effective access to vessels with a range of capabilities. NSF was founded to promote the progress of science, to advance the national health, prosperity, and welfare, and to help secure the national defense. As many of you know, we do that by funding merit-reviewed science that's conducted by universities, investigators, and research institute investigators throughout the U.S. The Division of Polar Programs is responsible for coordinating NSF's efforts at the poles of our planet. So as you can imagine, this is a very interdisciplinary activity. The division's Arctic Science section touches, in fact, on nearly every discipline that's supported by and within NSF. The regional perspective of the section fostered early adoption of interdisciplinary science and explicit programs to encourage integrated systems-level science. Maintaining a regional purview also entails extensive interagency and, of course, international engagement. Knowledge of the unique operational constraints and close working relationships with external partners are key to ensuring that we plan for and support execution of an innovative and productive portfolio of awards. The Arctic Science section currently expends, as you heard in my introduction, about $100 million annually, with about $60 million of that going directly to investigators and $40 million towards logistics to enable the research. These investments leverage and support additional funding originating from within and outside the agency. To give you an idea of the breadth of our program, let's take a look at annual spatial mapping of our Arctic Field Program sites. Field support entails ships, aircraft, surface vehicles, and activities at fixed and temporary stations. Watch for the year in the upper left-hand corner. Blue flags denote relatively permanent field installations. Yellow dots indicate distributed observation sites on land. Various colored lines correspond to major research cruises. We own and maintain Summit Station in Greenland for year-round operations. In partnership with the University of Alaska, NSF supports a long-term ecological research site at Toolik Lake in Alaska. We also partner with other agencies to support permanent research facilities in Barrow, Alaska, and Tiksi, Russia. We support research from a variety of ships, including the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Healy, and vessels from the UNOLS, that's University National Oceanographic Laboratory System, fleet, as well as those of other nations. As we page through the years, I'd like you to notice that our sites change to accommodate changing research priorities. Some sites require people in the field, whereas others are largely autonomous. A broad geographic scope is needed to understand a rapidly changing Arctic system. Managing that within logistics and budget constraints is, of course, challenging. At the end of this annual sequence, you'll see a composite mapping of all locations over the last 12 years. As one important contribution to optimizing the amount of merit-worthy science that NSF supports, I serve as chair of the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee, called IARPIC. In 2013, IARPIC produced a 5-year plan that focuses on research best advanced through interagency coordination. Activities of IARPIC figure strongly in the stewardship component of the National Strategy for the Arctic Region and its implementation plan. The IARPIC 5-year plan focuses on the 7 themes that you see here. And just in case you can't read them, I'll read them for you. Sea ice and marine ecosystem studies, terrestrial ice and ecosystem studies, atmospheric studies, observing systems, regional climate models, sustaining communities, and human health studies. Activities and the people involved in implementing these themes are described on the IARPIC collaboration website that you can find readily by Googling IARPIC collaborations. That website was newly established for scientists from federal, state, academic, NGO, and industry organizations to find talent, share their work, and team up to solve hard problems. It's a great site that I look at often. One example of research aimed at addressing impacts of Arctic change is the Distributed Biological Observatory. In the polar ocean, dramatic changes in sea ice thickness and extent and rapid warming raise questions about how marine ecosystems will evolve. This is a huge biological experiment that's unfolding on a timescale of decades. And the coming changes will undoubtedly affect ocean biogeochemistry and the marine food web, with major consequences for native hunters and Arctic commercial fisheries. As you can imagine, there are huge observational challenges involved in determining the rates and direction of Arctic marine ecological changes. The NSF Arctic Observing Network program is sponsoring the development of a distributed biological observatory. This DBO is a change detection array along a latitudinal gradient from the northern Bering Sea to the Barrow Arc. The DBO started with a pilot project in 2010 and now has active involvement from NSF, NOAA, BOEM, Canada, China, Korea, Japan, and Russia. This project is an example of how US agencies under the IARPC umbrella and various nations can work together to overcome the challenges of studying the Arctic Ocean and surrounding seas. NSF is providing key coordination leadership to ensure the success of the complex distributed biological observatory undertaking, including enlisting data collection cruises on vessels from many nations, standardizing measurement protocols, and developing multinational open data policies. Of course, there are many more examples that you can find on the web, and very importantly, I now stand between you and lunch. Thank you very much for the opportunity.